Namaste. Hi, beautiful souls. Welcome. So, today I'm here to share with you some insights into tarot of Japanese poetry. Now, yesterday, when I was preparing for live readings, I decided that in the theme of what I wanted to talk about yesterday, that this would be a perfect deck for those sorts of reflections. And what happened yesterday in live readings was pretty special in that I pulled a card, and I have not worked with this deck before. Pulled a card and dove into the artwork and read the poem for most of the cards that I pulled, and was somehow able to weave this spacious and poetic and beautiful energy of the deck into the card readings. It was really something, and I wasn't planning on presenting this deck for a little while because I haven't worked with it yet and didn't quite know how I'm going to use it. But I was so moved by the readings yesterday that I decided, okay, I need to share this deck if you don't know about it while it is still around, and then we'll look at the cards, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it, and what my pull to this deck is. Now, it's very different. It's definitely not one, aloha Jonathan, it's not one that you can, if you are looking for a deck that is comfortable to read, whether you read with a Thoth Tarot or a Thoth inspired deck or a Waite Smith inspired deck, it's not like that. While there are cards where you could for sure weave in a correspondence to a familiar meaning, this is one that is, I want to say, primarily intuitive, and it's going to tap into your own poetry and your own sense of all that means. And I have done a little bit of research about the poets and the poems, and I'll share with you more on that today as well too. And I have a deep affinity for this culture. The first time I lived in Japan, I lived there it was just over 3 years, and I spent a lot of time deeply immersed in the culture, and came back after 3 years, and then took 2 more years. I had my first degree as a teacher, and then I took a couple more years of Japanese studies so that I could actually teach Japanese and be part of the development. At that time, there was a huge PAC-RIM program that was being built, Chinese, a social studies program, but Chinese and Mandarin as well too. So this was it means a lot to me, this. And I want to see, if you're going to do a deck like this, I wanted to see it done well. And so that's why I spent a little bit of time today going down a rabbit hole researching one of these poets. So I want to share that with you, okay? But let's get to the cards, because I know that's what you want to see. And I do want to show you one thing, and that is in the guidebook. This is a beautifully printed deck and guidebook, by the way. The guidebook is stitched. It is full color, and in the guidebook you get a little bit closer into the artwork, so you can see a few more of the details. Okay, and you can see in the guidebook there is in this case we have a haiku, and the poet is credited, and there are keywords for each of the cards as well too. But what I have found is that the gift of this deck is in the art. It's in the art, and perhaps a reflection of the art. Also, I think this should be at the front of the book. At the back, there is this page that credits the artist. You see the name over there, Vika Yakimenko. And so we have painting up at the top, poetry and conventional meaning working together to create a story. Okay. And yesterday, as this card was pulled by one of you, and I was really feeling a connection to the Fool in the Victorian Fairy Tarot. And in that particular deck, the only human in that deck is in the Fool card. They are following the fairies and kind of getting lost in the forest. And this reminded me so much of that, because we see this Fool is trying to catch fireflies. Naive soul bumps into a thorn, catching fireflies. After all, together with the sun, the moon, that constantly illuminate the heavens, without knowing the end, you will rule the earth. What are you thinking about now? Poetry by Prince Owie, son of Prince Toneri. And so I'm not going to read the poems for all of the cards, but there's this gift, there's this perspective. There is a real sense of spaciousness and beauty in the artwork that is really worthwhile sitting with before, I would say, reading the poem, and before trying to force any sort of an association with a meaning that you may or may not be familiar with. And of course, there will be references in the artwork. You know, I mean, it is Japanese culture, but it is an ancient culture that will tap into a lot of people's heartbeats. And probably the best way for me to say this is, I remember when I cracked open the, hi Perry, by the way, sorry I didn't say hello. When I first opened the Dust to Onyx Tarot, I had an immediate, primordial response to that tarot deck. And I knew that somewhere deep in my soul that I connected to the beings in that deck. Now I am, obviously, right? I'm a white woman. Why would I feel so much affinity and connection to the energy of that deck? And that has to do with the fact that, you know, we're all connected and really, really powerful. And so I believe through this ancient culture, there you will find remarkable connections. I like that comment, Jonathan. Jonathan says, I keep this deck for my personal readings when I have time to really zen out. Now, another thing that you may or may not know about Japanese poetry is that a lot of the famous poets, actually, I'll tell you a little bit about this poem here. A lot of the famous poets were Japanese royalty. And this was, and many of them, their work was published and shared with the masses. And it was also, poetry was seen as a, isn't that, you know, and this is funny because I was just in the Falarco session, that's why I was a little bit late coming on, talking about the kings. And in the Falarco's tarot, each of the kings have antenna. They have a crown. And hi, Jamie. And the crowns, the antenna, connect them to the astral realm, to the divine. And remember too as well that in many of these ancient cultures, royalty was seen as a divine lineage. And so it's just a really interesting rabbit hole to go down. All right, so in the guidebook here, for the Hierophant, this is another haiku. Sorry, I didn't focus. I'm just going to read it to you. Haiku by Basho Matsuo. The abbot drinks his morning tea in his signified calmness, chrysanthemums in the garden. Okay, now I'm going to go to my notes for today, and I want to just share with you. I wonder if I can copy and paste this. Had I had more time, I would have done this. So this is the haiku in Japanese. Okay. Asa cha nomu, so shizuka nari, kiku no hana. Asa cha nomu. Now there is no subject here, and these. So I want to explain to you the process of making this deck. And I had a very short conversation with Irina. Chat through Etsy, and she said that this deck was created from a love of the poetry and the culture, that none of the staff have any affiliation with the Japanese culture. It's simply a matter of respect and a love for the medium. And then they connected with Vika to do the art. So remember that these poems were created without the artwork, right? The artwork is the inspiration that is seen through the three-dimensional eyes. And the poetry, this sort of poetry, is often prompted by seasonal changes. And so the second stanza, which is based on the tranquility of the environment. And so this is a poem that is about enjoying the morning cup of coffee and the peace of the garden while drinking in the beauty of the surroundings, which are chrysanthemums in this particular poem. And so there's a real gift here that is captured by the translation of the poem into artwork. And so this is a massive, massive project. And I found this wonderful PDF that had many translations of Basho's poetry. And here is another one, just for, I'll share with you a couple of them. So if you have the book, you can look at the guidebook. So here is another translation. A monk sips morning tea. It's quiet, the chrysanthemums flowering. Oh, this one is very subtle difference. And because I am such a nerd for the Japanese culture, what I would like to do as well is to go through and find other poems in Japanese and then compare and contrast the poem that is in the guidebook as well too. But that's just nerdy me, and I'm just very touched by this offering. It's really beautiful. So let's get through the rest of the majors, and then I'll share with you another poem. The Lovers. So this is the waterfall. The waterfall is the chariot. The mountain stream goes down. The ice will bite him. It will crash on the cliffs, and the wind is blowing from the steep, accelerating the flowing of the water. Fujiwara no Toshinari, also known as Fujiwara no Shunzei. And it's really interesting because when I lived in Nara-ken the first 2 years, I lived near the the Fujiwara ruins. And I just kind of just feel, I don't know, this is great. I'm really happy about this deck. A loving heart is raging like an angry lion, but the paradise bird of tenderness is here, close by. Yosano Akiko. Yesterday we had a very I'm glad you appreciate that, Jonathan. Yeah. Jamie, what did you say? I backed it on Kickstarter because it reminded me of my mom's art. Yeah, it's beautiful. We had a very special, it was Aisha, had a reading yesterday with this card, and it tapped into something very deep and very special for her, though not this particular culture, but it had to do with 3 generations of different mindsets, and it was a very, very profound reading. So 11 is justice. I am exhausted with resentment. I am not afraid that my sleeves decay with tears. I am sorry for my good name rumors will destroy. The author is Sagami, also known as Oto Jiju. So in the black and white, in the window, there are onlookers. This is a very powerful card. And I think in some instances, the poetry really, really does enhance. It's amazing. Yes, Perry, the waterfall is a very powerful force. This is a I wouldn't what I want to say, I wouldn't pin this for a temperance card, but this really speaks to me to the middle path, and perhaps that is indeed what temperance is. The poem speaks in a different direction though, so I want to encourage you, if you have this deck, to, sometimes you want to just allow the artwork to go where you need it to go, and other times let yourself be guided by the poetry. Foreshadowed the course of the heavenly bodies. As soon as the sun goes down over the ruins of the castle, the moon comes up. Right? It's a flow. It's an exchange of energy. It's not avoidable. Sometimes we create the resistance that is the rubble that's about to come down. And I think this was everybody's favorite card yesterday. I had some emails afterwards. And this card moved a lot of people. I look at the moon and thousands of vague sorrows in my soul. Even if autumn has come not, to me alone, nevertheless. Oe no chisato. This is a really interesting card. Can you see how I don't like to keep changing the focus of the camera though, because then it won't focus on the cards. You see how there's people viewing the moon, and then we see the reflection of the moon in the water, and then there's somebody who's in the distance viewing the whole scene. And this, of course, would be Fuji-san, Fujiyama, which almost takes on a, I want to say that mountain is a god. It's not just a mountain. At least it doesn't feel that way in Japan. So this is a highly, highly reflective card. And the sun, this is the picture on the box. And there's something about this symbol, about Japanese culture. I mean, this is the symbol that is on the Japanese flag, Nihon, the land of the rising sun, the foundation of the sun. It's the source, right? The source of energy. And then, oh my goodness, listen, look at this card. This card didn't come up yesterday, but when I read this poem, I was tremendously moved. Thoughts burned me. From the burning house I finally left, and now I hear in silence the voice of the divine law. And this is such a pretty picture. This is the World card. And we have the Tori, T-O-R-I-I, Tori, the gate at the end. Instead of the mandorla that we see in a World card, we have the Tori at the end. Yeah, it's stunning, stunning World card. Okay, so now let me tell you a little bit about the structure of the deck, because I'm sure if you read tarot, you will be able to work with the major arcana, no problem. And so I'm going to put out the minors, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the structure. Okay, so the suits are organized by season. I think, well, I'll do it this way, but that doesn't make sense. Autumn. I'm going to put them, autumn is the one that's first in the guidebook, so I'm going to put that first, and then we'll go autumn, winter, spring, and summer. So there's more than 78 cards in this deck, and it's 100% possible to shuffle the whole deck together. It is, if you are a riffle shuffler, I was riffle shuffling this deck yesterday with ease. All the extra cards were in it. So yeah, so the suits are seasons. And the correspondences are you may recognize some of the correspondences and you may not. And I personally do not want to force the correspondences. I really don't. I just want to let this deck be what it is. And I'll tell you what the correspondences are, and it may or may not make sense when we are looking at the cards. So the suit of autumn corresponds to pentacles. And I know that makes sense for a lot of people with the harvest and we have sort of the fruit of the season in the autumn that we harvest. So that is pentacles. And what do I have up there next? Winter. Winter is swords, which I know works for some people. Winter is swords. And spring is cups. And I've often thought of my time living in Whistler and the melting of the glaciers and the energy of water that flows in spring. So for sure, I can work with that. And actually, I'm going to just look for a second in terms of the Wildwood Tarot and see how this aligns. And then we have summer will be fire, right? Yeah, summer is wands. Okay, so just out of curiosity, before I go on, okay, so no, it's different. It's different. Summer is the same in the Wildwood, which is fire. Spring in the Wildwood is air. Okay, so it's different. So this deck has its own thing going on, but we have an extra card with a beautiful piece of poetry called The Day Before the Season. And I have one, it's probably Victorian Fairy Tarot, but I think there is another one where the ace of the suit, you can see both seasons in the ace. It's like a transformation from one season to another. And in this deck, we have an extra card called The Day Before the Season. While the aces represent a beginning, an opening of the season, this would be an example of this deck doing its own thing. So often, I see aces as the seed, the full potential of the suit. And the aces in this deck are the beginning of the season. And I'll read you the poem for the Ace of Summer. Really, really like this art. Eternal seagulls over the surface of the Shinano River, tirelessly marking the air, measuring with their wings the 1,000-legged expanse. Yosano Akiko. If you would like me to pick up any of the cards and bring it closer to the camera, I can. I know this is not you don't need to see my face here. Let me remove myself and then you'll see the cards up bigger. There you go. Yeah. And why don't I put them in order of wands, cups, swords, and pentacles in case that helps you in your vision. Okay, so I'm going to do that for you. So you know what you're if you, that's how I tend to work with the tarot. So there's your wands, there's your fire. And there's your cups. Oh, isn't this interesting? Okay, so here's some more Sadhana nerdiness coming out. If we look at the elements that are presented here, so this is wands, cups, swords, pentacles. What am I seeing here? Oh, there's also an order going this way as well too. Autumn, winter, spring, summer. Okay. 3. Oh my goodness, 3 of spring. So this is 3 of cups. Let's look at that poem. That is a stunning piece of art. I'll hold that up to the camera for you. Sometimes is pleasant, warmed up in the spring sun, to gather in a circle and peacefully converse with friends under the old willow. Ryokan Taigu. You know, this was one of my favorite things about living in Japan, was the number of times we would have meals under trees or in gardens. There's a real reverence for the beauty of the land and the landscape. Yeah, and this poet, so this is one that I'm going to do research on. Ryokan Taigu. Ryokan Taigu is so that was the 10 of, sorry, that was the 10, the wheel card as well too. A very moving story. Yeah. Okay, 4. This is a powerful image here. Look at the barren landscape and the way this woman is on the suspension bridge. Gosh, imagine the things you could pick up in a reading. And I wonder, you know, so for me, the 4s, I'm looking for sacred space. And this whole deck is about sacred space, but I have certain associations that are things that I look for in cards. It's going to be fun getting to know this deck. That 5 of autumn, oh my God, that is gorgeous. Wow. And look at the 5 of spring. Okay, 5 of autumn. 5 of autumn. What is, oh yes. Okay, so this is Kobayashi Isa. And Kobayashi Isa is another poet that I will do a little bit more research into. And I want to change this translation. And so as part of the process in creating this deck, and remember, this is not a curated deck. This is painted by Vika Yakimenko, who's credited in the back of the book, who I believe is from the Ukraine. And part of the correspondence was that Irina, Ilyina, I asked her if she could give me more information about Vika, and it sounded like they haven't been in touch for the last couple of years. And anyway, so I'm still going to look for a connection to Vika. So here's an example. The poem in the book says, Autumn night, reads Autumn night, clumsily the wanderer patches his shabby dress. And that just feels like a really awkward translation of Japanese to me. And instead of dress, I would probably use the garment name. And I don't think it's kimono. I think it's the pants that he's repairing. So yeah, so nerdy me, sometimes the poetry isn't sitting well, but I get the beauty of the art and all of that. So yeah. Okay. And yes, for sure we can see some correspondences to Rider-Waite, right? So I haven't really been looking for them, but here's your Six of Swords. And your Six of Spring. Oh my goodness, what's happening in the Six of Spring? Six of Spring. I have no idea why the guidebook is put together the way it is. So in the Six of Spring, we see, I would say, an elder in a chair. And this is also really funny because in that day and age, I don't think they would have had chairs. And if they had chairs, they wouldn't look like that. So is that being too exacting? I don't know. But I really like this art. I love the art. The poem, there's two poems here. One is cherries. Cherry blossoms are blooming. And about these old trees, people sang once. So part of the tradition of hanami is you take sake and food and you go and hang out under the cherry blossoms and you have a party and people sing and get drunk and eat and have a really good time. And so here is this old woman sitting in her chair on her deck looking at the cherry blossoms, remembering times when people gathered and had an amazing time. So yeah, it's really beautiful. Okay. Shall we do, I'm going to do another poem. This is a Seven of Autumn. So Seven of Autumn is Seven of Pentacles. So if you want to get a Seven of Pentacles in your head from any other deck, that will bring in that particular layer. And in this painting, we're looking at what? We're looking at an evergreen tree. I'm just going to get a close-up of the picture in my hand. We're looking at an evergreen tree amidst a bunch of deciduous trees. So this is the season of autumn, and those trees will shed their leaves, and I can't even think what a Seven of Pentacles is. Huh, interesting. I almost feel like Seven of Wands energy here. So those trees will shed their leaves, and that evergreen tree will still be standing tall and strong amidst the trees with no leaves on them. So that's pretty cool. That's very cool. Okay. All right. So here is the poem in Japanese. Yuku aki no nao tanomoshi ya Ao Mikan. And in the book, it reads, already the end of autumn, but the green tangerine still believes in the days to come. Already the end of autumn, but the green tangerine still believes in the days to come. And tangerine refers to mikan, you know, Japanese oranges. This is a pretty deep little poem. Let me give you a couple other translations. There's one. Yeah, and it's absolutely fascinating. I asked the creators about the source for their poetry, but she didn't share that with me. And as I did my rabbit hole dive today, I really started to appreciate and understand the multitude of translations of this body of poetry that's out there. It really is incredible. Okay, 8. There are a couple, you know, there's a few. If you're going to use, I don't know if anytime in the distant future I'll be doing multi-card readings with this deck, unless I feel compelled for support for a single card reading. But there are you know, sorry, I want to go back. I want to highlight Laura's comment. So are the green oranges on the trees in the fall and then they ripen in the spring? I don't even know the cycle of oranges. But yeah, it's such a beautiful. I understand. But you know what I mean? Like, you could read it multiple ways. It's kind of beautiful. What I was saying is that this too is a deck where you will find symbols common in multiple cards, and there are doors and windows in several cards. So you will be able to weave stories with common symbols. Yeah. 8 of Summer, which is calling to me right now. Near my window, the wind rustled, playing with the bamboo leaves, getting shorter, the slumber of summer nights. Princess Shikishi Naishi no. Near my window, the wind rustled, playing with the bamboo leaves, getting shorter, the slumber of summer nights. Nine. This one is also a poem by Basho, but I couldn't find this poem in Japanese, so I've still got lots of work to do. That's right, they do. That's right, because we get the mandarin oranges in winter. Yes. Okay, I need to look at that card again. I need to look at that card again. But it's funny that in the painting, we don't see a tree. We don't see a Mikan tree. At least, not that I can see. Where is it? Oh my goodness, where's the card? So I don't see a mandarin orange tree in this. So this is, you know what I mean? It's poetic. The whole deck is poetic. We can read this on many different levels, and we can get hung up on the words of the poetry, or we can get lost in the painting. We can marry a meaning between the poetry and the painting and meanings that we're familiar with. You know, like this is such a beautiful opportunity to work with a deck at all of these levels. And then here's your tens. Ten of Summer was another one that I had success with finding the poem. Ten of Summer is about a peony, which is one of my favorite flowers. Hi, Didi. Namaste. And here's the poem for Ten of Summer. Botan shibe fukaku wake izuru hachi no nagori kana. And, oh, you probably want me to read that for you. 10 of Summer. Oh, peonies. Peonies, peonies. How reluctantly the bee peeps out of the fragrant peony core. I have about 12 translations of this poem. Yes. So here's one. From deep in the peony's stamens, a bee crawls out, a reluctant parting. Oh, this is a good one. I like this one. From the heart of the sweet peony, a drunken bee. Isn't that good? And as I was diving down this rabbit hole today, looking at all this different poetry and translations of poetry, I came across a lot of poems that weren't nature-based. They were about the events that happen, everything from drunkenness to hangovers to sexual encounters during these parties and things in nature. And it was really, really fun because these poems are hundreds and hundreds of years old and written by royalty about real life, about real encounters with people and nature. The court cards in this deck, there are a bunch of them. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we have we have an alternate 10 of Winter. So in one of the suits, so in the 10 of Swords, we have 2 variations on the 10 of Swords. Okay, so I will just show you. There are 2 10s of Swords, and only in that suit. As for the court cards, we have, I want to say, and I find the ants, there is something very sweet about peonies, because when I don't have a peony bush where I am right now, but when I planted one when I was living in Whistler, the ants love the peonies, and it's very hard actually to cut a flower and bring it inside without it swarming with ants. You have to get it right just in the morning when it opens, as it's ready to open. Court cards, knave. Knave. There are more than 4. So we have knave and princess, knight, queen, and king. Knave, princess, knight, queen, king. So a lot of court cards. So if you are doing readings with this deck, you may not want to keep all of these court cards in. Isn't that interesting? The only knight that is, oh no, the Knight of Autumn is on horseback. I'm fascinated. I am fascinated. And I love that the guidebook has a borderless close-up, more saturated color version of the paintings. Queen of Autumn. Look at her looking out up on high over the landscape. Jonathan, let's go to your question and see if there are any instructions in the book for working with the court cards. I don't believe in the book there are instructions, but of course, you know, you can. So knave was equivalent of the page, and the princess is equivalent of the page. So really you can use what you want to use. These are the queens. But I'd like to look at the Queen of Autumn, if that's okay. Queen of Autumn. Peacefully reigning here, my sovereign, you, a deity, at the behest of the gods, here is where you rule, along glorious shores where the waters of the Yoshino River flow swiftly. You built a palace that ascended into the heights of heaven, from which you marvel at your country. The Yoshino Palace no longer stands. The Yoshino River is actually a very popular place for swimming in the summer. I lived very close to the Yoshino River. It's also a beautiful place to go for cherry blossom viewing. And that whole prefecture, Nara Prefecture, is just pulsing with the frequency of history. It's crazy. And, you know, it's funny because my past lifetimes, obviously I had lifetimes in Japan as well, but they are, I want to say they are resolved, as opposed to my lifetimes where I was in the India area, which are not resolved. And so perhaps this is why my, I don't know, it's like just a peace and a love and appreciation of this culture so deeply. Yeah, and there's your kings. So those are the final cards. Those are the final cards. So that is a walkthrough and an awful lot of ramblings from me. I hope that this gives you an appreciation for what this deck is. It's still available, and if this is your, if you have other comments, or I don't know, I might come back and share more on this once I get to know it a little bit, because I think it's quite extraordinary. Yeah. So thanks for hanging out with me. I will be back shortly in the Facebook group. Have a lovely evening. Namaste. Love that, Jonathan. You guys are still asking questions. Dee Dee, it was after, but honestly, the moment I moved into Japan, I knew that I had been there many, many times. Yeah. Okay. Bye. Good night. Thank you all.